And joining us right now is Cully Stimson. He's a former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Detainee Affairs. He's currently a military judge, so who better to give us some insight as to what's going on in the Fort Hood trial than Cully Stimson. Thanks for joining us, sir.
Morning, guys.
So we're told that the prosecution may wrap up today. Is there still a problem with Army Major Nidal Hassan's defense team, though? Last we heard, his lawyers wanted out. Where does that stand?
Well, they're still there by order of the judge to act as standby counsel, and even though they protested because they thought that they couldn't sit there ethically because his defense is inconsistent with the way they would have put things on, the judge ordered them to stay there, so they're still there.
Well, what is his defense, if you could sort of summarize it for us?
I think his defense is what he said in his opening statement. I did it. I can't tell you the whole story. And we'll see what he says in his sentencing argument if he has one.
All right, so here's my question. The judge has limited some discussion of motive in the case and said certain evidence could not be entered into the case. But Hassan himself just sent a letter to a local newspaper saying that he did this because he was defending his Muslim faith.
Right.
Why do we need to limit the amount of information that goes before the panel?
Well, remember that he wanted to put that on as a defense throughout the trial, and Judge Osborne said, no, the defense of others' defense, which is a real defense you can put on in appropriate circumstances, is not applicable in your circumstances, so you're prohibited from doing it. So he's putting that letter out there to defend himself, to assert his defense in a public way, but not before the members.
So Nidal Hassan says that he did this to defend his Muslim faith. He believes that the United States is at war with Islam. He perpetrated these murders down at Fort Hood in the name of Islam. I mean, to me, I hear that and I think, oh, this is an act of terrorism. It sounds like Nidal Hassan believes that it's an act of terrorism. Why won't the U.S. government and the military call it an act of terrorism? It's
important, Larry, to distinguish between what is appropriate for a court of law, a military court of law, and then what is appropriate for not only the public discussion and domain, but perhaps awards or decorations that the military could give the victims there. The court of law is very limited to one thing. Did he premeditate the murders of these people, and if so, is he guilty beyond a reasonable doubt? So that's topic A that we're on in the courtroom now. Topic B, which I think you brightly bring up, is should these folks who were killed by this individual under these circumstances when the trial's over get Purple Hearts or other benefits that they would have gotten had they been in Iraq or Afghanistan?
All right, so here is my question. Under what circumstances does this guy get the death penalty? What has to happen for that to occur?
Yeah. So I know there's been much hullabaloo about Judge Osborne keeping some of the sentencing evidence out that the government wanted to put in. Courts, typically, if you watch court TV and the rest of it, they're free-for-alls at sentencing. People get up and shout and scream and cry and all the rest of it. In courts-martial, the judge is limited, and so are the lawyers on both sides, by what they can put on in the sentencing case under Rule for Court-Martial 1001. It basically is limited to financial and social and medical impact or cost any person or entity who is injured as a result of the offense. A capital case requires also that the government prove aggravating factors, and it has to prove one or more of the aggravating factors listed in the rules for court-martial. I think they've more than done that here. We'll see what defense he has to put out mitigating factors, but I don't think he's really asserted any mitigating factors at all. So it's really whether or not the members, the jury, will decide that the government's met one or more of the aggravating factors, and then whether they vote unanimously for death.
So our guest is Cully Stimson, and he is a former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Detainee Affairs, and he's currently a military judge, so he knows his way around the JAG courtroom and the JAG process. You said that there needs to be unanimous. First of all, this is not a typical jury of Hassan's peers, as we would know it. How big is the jury panel, and are they all officers, or are there enlisted men? How does a jury work in a JAG situation?
The way it works in the military is if you're enlisted, and he's not, you can have a jury, we call them members, of up to one-third enlisted members. Here, an officer, in an officer defendant court-martial, the jury has to be comprised of officers above your rank. In other words, at slightly advanced over your rank or higher.
Right.
He's a major, so they have to be majors who have more time and grade or lieutenant colonels or above. And for capital cases, it has to be 12 members voting unanimously, 12 or more, voting unanimously not only for guilty and then but also voting unanimously and then voting unanimously for guilt to impose a death sentence.
It sounds like, Cully Stimson, I hate to jump to conclusions. It sounds like there's no doubt there's going to be a guilty verdict here. I can't imagine how there wouldn't, given his defense.
Yeah.
So the question, I guess the next question is, how quick is there an automatic appeal since it's a capital case, and how quick is that process in the military trial system versus the civilian trial system?
Yeah, assuming a guilty verdict and assuming a sentence over a year, which there will be, then it's an automatic appeal to the Army Court of Criminal Appeals and then up to the Court of Appeals to the Armed Forces, which is our top court. And, of course, it could go to the Supreme Court.
All right. I want to ask you quickly about Bradley Manning, going to be sentenced up at Fort Meade maybe today. What did you draw from listening to what we know about that particular case?
That the military and our government take seriously violations of secrecy, that if you violate your oath, that you're going to suffer the consequences, whether it's administrative if it's minor or criminal if it's major. And so we'll see where this judge, who's an excellent judge, comes down in terms of the sentencing range. He has a cap of 90 years now, so we'll see where she comes in on that.
And there was testimony about Bradley Manning's sexuality. Apparently he was confused about his sexuality at some point. Does that factor at all into this discussion or just a sideshow?
I think it factors in legally, to be nerdy about it, because the defense believes that it's mitigation evidence, that he was psychologically disturbed, and one of his mitigating factors is that he had this gender identity crisis, and that factored into his actions that he took.
Interesting.
All right. Cully Stimson, former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Detainee Affairs and currently military judge. Thank you so much for joining us and giving us the insight on the Fort Hood trial as well as the